Hi everybody, and welcome to this installment of Ding Repair Chronicles. Today we're going to be repairing a ding that is caused by your knee going into your surfboard. Since this is an instructional video, we're going to be taking our time and going step by step. We're not going to be taking any shortcuts. So remember, this is just one way to do it. There are several other ways, but we're going to be showing you this way today, so enjoy. It's important to assess the damage first of all. When you first look at the ding, you might only notice the pressure dent and the cracks. But if you look at the fin box at the top of the screen, you can see there's some damage there, as well as a buckle off to the right of the main impact zone. Also on the rail, it's been blown out and actually skewed, so the rocker line has been distorted. Prep the area. Since we're doing this by hand, I like to use a piece of 40 grit paper and a flat block. This is one of the most important parts of the ding repair process, because if you don't prep the area, you're not going to get a good mechanical bond. You want to make sure that all loose parts are sanded off, like that part there. The better we prep the area, the easier it's going to be to then fix the ding. Next, we're going to clean off the ding from any dust. I'm using my shirt, but you can also use a rag or a paper towel. Fill in the damaged areas. We're going to tape the fin box off first. We're going to be using our Aluzine 2-to-1 epoxy surf resin. This is our proprietary blend of epoxy. We're going to mix in some Q-cell, which is hollow sphere bubbles. This adds a lot of volume to the resin and keeps the weight low. I want to pre-mix the resin to make sure the A and B parts mix properly, and then we're going to add in our Q-cell. We want to mix until we get a paste-like substance. You can see you have to basically scrape it out of the bucket. That's what we want. Think of it as this, the thicker and fluffier, the lighter the filler is going to be. We just want to make sure we get enough filler on the board so we have something to sand down and smooth out so we can blend it back to the original shape of the board. It's okay if you put too much of the mixture on the board, so we're just going to level it off basically. I'm using the stick, but you could use a spreader or a squeegee here. I'm going to get a little bit more on the rail. That's actually an important area to have more on, because you want to build that rail back up so when you go to sand it, you can blend it back in. As you can see, it looks like we have enough material there to work with. Sand the hardened Q-cell. Now it's just time to put some good old-fashioned elbow grease into it. We're going to sand it from all angles so we don't just sand a divot or any ridge or bump into the board. So we're going to work all around, hit it from all angles. You can see we're blending right there. The flat block and the 40 grit does a really good job of taking off material quickly. Now we're going to prep the area for lamination. So we've already dusted the board off. As you can see, it's nice and smooth and the Q-cell mixture did its job. We're going to cut the tape back from the fin box since we're going to be laying up the board with fiberglass cloth. Going to get our cloth on the board. Since it's kind of an odd shaped ding we're dealing with, For the initial cut, I'm going to lay it on there and just kind of cut something close to what the shape is. As you can see, I cut it just to overlap the Q-cell area. For the top one, we're going to do a little bit larger of a cut that's then going to lay over the bottom. So basically, the first layer of cloth is to cover the Q-cell. Second is to cover the extended area around it, as you can see when I lay the cloth back on. Generally, there's only one layer of cloth on the bottom of a surfboard, but since there's a lot of flex and pressure put on that point in front of the fins, we're going to do 2 layers. We tape off, and then we pour out our aluzine epoxy resin, 2-to-1 ratio, so it's very simple to mix. Make sure we stir it properly. Since we have such a small area, we have a lot of working time. We're just going to pour it out, take our time, and just move the resin around. You don't really have to work it in like polyester resin. It saturates very well. So we're just going to scoot it around and let it do its own work. We want to build it up to the edge there, make a little bead, and then pull it right off and down the 2 layers of cloth that we have that are going to overlap to the deck. Just want to make sure everything's saturated properly, there's no air bubbles. That's what we're doing here, is just pulling it and wrapping it down to the deck. As you can see, it's wrapping very nicely. Cloth is fully saturated with no problem. Right here we're going to be pulling off any excess resin so it doesn't pool up. That way we get a nice tight lamination without any of the cloth floating on the resin. Blend the cloth by sanding. Now we're going to take a piece of 80 grit paper on the flat block and basically just run it right over the cloth that we laminated. The cloth is fully cured, so all we're going to be doing is hitting the high spots and blending that into the rest of the surfboard. You can hit it from all angles and do circular passes as well. This doesn't take long, and it's a great way to prep for the hot coat. Now we're going to prep the area for the hot coat. We're going to do this by taping off the edge of the board so we can reset the tail edge. Since we did all that prep work, this is a very easy step where we don't need to use a lot of resin in the hot coat. We're just going to do 1 layer, and as you can see, I'm pouring it on very frugally. It's not a thick layer, it's very thin, and that's going to make the sanding of the hot coat very easy as well. All we have to do, since everything is very smooth and flat already, is just basically seal the cloth. We're going to use some tape to clean off the excess dust and oils on the top part, and we're going to tape off the bottom edge as well. That way it just gives us a nice clean little line to work with after that we just have to knock down with some light sandpaper and simply paint it on as well. If you do the prep work, it makes every step that much easier. Sanding the hot coat. I'm going to start off with that piece of 80 grit just to cut into it. Generally, if I was using a sander, I would start with a 150 grit, but since we're doing it by hand, I'm going to start with 80 grit. Then, after we've taken the shiny film off of the resin, we're going to move to a 120 by hand. Basically, everything's been flattened out, so now we're just removing scratches with the 120. Next is 220. Same thing, we're just going to do little circles and just take out the scratches from the 120. Last step for me here is going to be wet sand with a 320 grit. The 320 wet sand does a nice job blending the ding repair in with the rest of the board. As you can see, the ding is finished. There's not really that much work that goes into that. Although it started off looking like a pretty bad repair, it turned out to be pretty easy because we took the proper steps and didn't cut corners.